Let's talk about testing and debugging. If you've got a bug, but you haven't tested the individual methods that go into the code you're trying to debug, this is the first step. You want to make sure that the methods work by themselves before you test them all working together in combination, because otherwise it's going to be really hard to figure out where the bug actually lies. So here's our tile state class, or rather this is my tile state class. I wrote a bunch of other methods like do random move and get random solvable board. But the key methods that you're interested in are these ones. We've got the get next states, that plays a key role. Move tile, most people are using this method inside get next states. And then checking if something's a goal. So it seems like these three methods would be great methods to test. And the way you test anything is you set up a simple situation, so set up a simple input and run the method, and then print out the output and check to see that it is what you think it should be. So if I wanted to test the isGoal method, for example, in some other class, I'll just have an empty main method, and I'll set up the goal state. I'll make a new tile state using that goal board. And then down here, I'll ask tile state 1, are you the goal? And I think that it should print true, because that's the goal. It would be also helpful to make sure that it doesn't just say everything's the goal. So I'll also set up another board that's not the goal, make a tile state out of it, and then ask that, are you the goal? So this should be like a really basic skill that you can, you look at a method and you're like, yep, I could test that. All I need to do is something like this. Let's do another one, move tile. So if I want to test move tile, you don't need a whole lot of code. Just set up a basic board, make a tile state, print the board, and then say, let's move one of the tiles. So here I'm trying to move row 2, column 1. It's a little hard to imagine, but you have to imagine this is the top row, middle row, bottom row. So row 2 would be the bottom row. Column 1 is the middle column. So I'm trying to move tile 5, and it should slide up into the blank square 0 here. And then you can print the board again and see, did it actually slide that tile up? Did it actually work? Get next states, you see, you can also test with just a couple lines of code. Same situation, make a board, create a tile state, then run the get next states method. That's going to return a list of next states, and then you try and print it out. Hey, whoops, and I know that there should be 3, because if I look at where, oh, nope, my bad, there should be 4, because the blank tile's in the middle, so I should be able to slide the 2 down, or the 4 over, or the 6 over, or the 5 up, any of those. Let me fix the slide. So after you run get next states, you can actually look and see, do I see 4 boards? Do I see 4 tile states? And then you can check to make sure, does each tile state look the way it should if it did all 4 of those moves? Okay, so let's talk about testing your search. If you've written like breadth first search, let's say, so I've called mine BFS for breadth first search. It's the same thing. Set up a simple situation, run your method, and check that it did what it should. So I think the simplest situation for searching is if you are 1 move away from the solution. So here I've created a board that's just 1 move away. I make a tile state out of that board, and now I'm going to run my breadth first search method on that initial board. Well, I know that if it finds the solution, it should return the solution state here. The way I know that is because it says so. Where's my code? It says so here. If the current board is the goal board, we return current. So a really key part of debugging is you have to know what to expect. If you don't know how to think about what your method is supposed to do, there's no possible way that you can test it or debug it. So having a basic understanding of what you're doing is kind of a prerequisite. What happens if it doesn't find the goal? If it doesn't find the goal, it should probably return null. And so then you could just put a print statement and check. You don't just want the goal state. We actually want to be able to see what is the sequence of solutions the sequence of states that lead to the solution. So the last slides the other day, I had some advice about that. In my own code, I made a method for that. So I pass in the result board, and then this method starts at the result, which is the goal state, and it goes backwards and says, goal state, what's your parent? What's your parent? What's your parent? And so I trace it backwards until I get to the initial state, and I print that whole sequence. If this works, I would then test it with an initial situation that is 2 moves away from being solved, and then 3 moves away from being solved. Okay, so what happens if you've done that and it's like just not working, like it infinitely loops or it does something weird? The first step is make sure that you actually tested your methods individually. if you haven't tested getNextStates by itself, maybe that's where the problem is, but it's going to be a lot harder to find if you are trying to run it within the context of your search. So I would say go back to the beginning and test those 3 methods separately just to make sure that they're working. If they are working, the next step I would say is there's a lot happening here, so we probably want to use print statements or the debugger to look inside the variables at key moments and say, does this look the way that I expect it to look? Again, you're not going to know if it's working or not unless you actually have a clear picture in your mind of what do you expect these variables to look like at different points. And that's why we did that thing in class where we traced it on the whiteboard. That was us trying to develop an understanding of what's actually happening here and what should the variables look like. If you've never used the debugger before, let me show you how to do it right now. Here's my method. It contains a bug. And you might know what the bug is, and you might not, but let's pretend that you don't. I said what I wanted to do was I wanted to set a breakpoint. So the way you do it is you click in the margin after the line number here, and the red circle is the breakpoint. And what a breakpoint means is that if you run the code in debug mode, so you hit the little bug button, the code will run, but it will pause execution right on that line. So let's do it. I think right now I'm running I don't know if I'm running the 1 state or the 2 state. I guess we'll find out soon. Okay, I know it's a little bit hard to see, but down here we can see all of my variables and what their values are. And you can also see them printed out here. So right now, initial state, it actually shows me what the initial state looks like. This is the output of my toString method. It says toVisit is size 1 because I've already added the initial state to my list of things to visit. Okay, so we're paused right here. So you can hit this button right here, this kind of up-down arrow, to take 1 step to the next line of code, and then you can check to make sure that everything looks good. Okay, so I'm going to check my variable next. Next should be whatever the first thing in my toVisit list was. And if I look, yeah, it looks like the next state to check is the same as my list of things to visit. So that's worked great. Let's take another step. So now I'm going to run getNextStates. And you see nextStates is size 4, and it should be size 4 because I see that the blank spot's in the middle. And then I can expand it and I can actually see what are the 4 next states. And it looks like this first state is what happens if I slid the 2 downwards. The next one is what happens if I slid the 4 over. This one is what happens if I slide the 6 over. And this one is what happens if I slide the 5 up. It takes a little practice to get used to looking at this horizontal representation and imagining it as a 3x3 grid. But the next states all look good. So now I'm going to keep stepping. And here it's just adding states to my toVisit. I'm going to keep stepping until it's done with that. Okay, now I'm back up at the top. So my list of things to visit is now length 5. Let's take one more step because I added the other 4. Okay, so here I am. So let's now check it. And now's when I see the bug. So you might have seen the bug before now if you were really thinking carefully. But why don't you pause it and decide what on the screen right now shows me what the bug is. Really pause and ponder. Okay, the thing that I'm noticing is that my next tile state is exactly the same as it was my first loop. And if I look at my list of boards to visit, the first thing in my list of boards to visit is the initial state. But if I think about what I'm expecting to happen, I'm supposed to remove that board from my list of things to visit because I've already checked it, so I don't need to visit it again. So I think what's going to happen is I'm going to be in an infinite loop where I keep looping in the while loop, but I just keep getting board 0 over and over and over again, and my to-visit list just keeps getting longer and longer because I never actually remove anything after I visit them. So I hope that you can see that the debugger will help you, but it's not magic. You have to have a really super clear idea in your mind of what your code is supposed to do. So if you're kind of stuck debugging, maybe the first step for you is not anything on the computer. Maybe the first step is to ask your partner or me or a TA to kind of help you think through what are you going to expect step by step. All right? Otherwise, I think the debugger is super helpful. I hope that this has helped. Good luck, everybody.